Hey everyone, welcome back. We're going deep on a question that we've gotten a ton of sources for. Can you use the same bong for both flower and dabs?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, there's actually a lot more to it than you might think at first.
For sure. It seems like one of those things that people have strong opinions about, so I'm really curious to break it all down.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, can you use the same knife to chop veggies and carve a roast?
Ooh, I like that analogy.
Right, you technically can, but maybe you shouldn't. Or, what are the things you got to think about if you do?
Exactly. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of the gear and all that jazz, let's talk about why these two methods are so different in the first place, even though they both start with, you know, good old cannabis.
Yeah, they both come from the plant, but the experience is so different, and it comes down to how we consume them.
Right.
So with flour, you're combusting the plant matter, right? You're inhaling the smoke.
Right.
It's almost like steeping herbs to make tea.
Yeah.
You get this mellow, full-bodied flavor. With dabs, you're talking about vaporization, not combustion.
Okay.
You're heating a concentrated extract to a precise temperature, and that releases the active compounds as vapor.
So it's more like an essential oil kind of thing.
Exactly.
You're getting a more potent and pure dose of the good stuff.
Yeah, and this is where we see the higher THC concentration with dabs, right?
Right. And that makes sense because it's like way more concentrated.
Exactly, and it's not just about the THC either. Dabs tend to preserve a wider range of terpenes,
Oh, interesting.
those aromatic compounds that give cannabis its unique flavor and effects.
So it's like the difference between fresh squeezed juice versus concentrate.
Exactly. Both have vitamins, but the fresh juice just has that brighter, more vibrant flavor.
Right. Right. Okay. So I know some people say that dabbing is like healthier because you're not inhaling smoke.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, it's not that simple. While combustion byproducts are definitely absent in dabbing, there's still so much we don't know about the long-term effects of inhaling concentrated vapor, especially at high temperatures.
Yeah, that's fair. It seems like moderation and high quality products are probably key, no matter which way you go.
I think that's great advice, yeah, no matter what you're doing.
So all that being said about the different ways that we consume flour and dabs, it makes sense that the tools and techniques are going to be pretty different too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And that's where things get really interesting when we start talking about using one bomb for both.
Okay, so can one bong truly handle both flour and those super high temp dabs?
Yeah, technically, yes, but there are some things you got to think about.
Okay,
The first thing is your bong needs to be made from high-quality, heat-resistant glass,
right.
like borosilicate glass, like Pyrex.
Mm-hmm.
It's designed to withstand extreme temperature changes without cracking.
Yeah, you definitely don't want your bong shattering from a torch. That would be bad.
No, you don't. And even with a sturdy bong, you also need to consider the attachments.
Okay.
Like if you're dabbing, you'll need a banger or a nail that's compatible with your bong's joint size.
Okay. So joint size is important. What does that even mean?
So bong joints typically come in two standard sizes, 14 millimeters and 19 millimeters.
Gotcha.
You need to make sure that your banger or nail matches your bong's joint for a secure fit and optimal airflow.
Okay.
If you use the wrong size, you could have leaks, spills, even accidents.
So safety and a smooth hit are definitely priorities.
Absolutely.
What are some of the best materials for those bangers and nails?
So quartz bangers are a popular choice.
Okay.
They heat up quickly, they cool down fast, and they provide a really clean, neutral flavor.
Like a blank canvas for your dabs.
Exactly, yeah. And then you have ceramic nails, too.
Yeah, I've heard of those. What's the deal with those?
If you prefer a slower, more even heat distribution, then ceramic nails are great.
Okay.
They can retain heat longer, which can affect the flavor profile of your dabs.
Interesting.
Some people say ceramic enhances certain terpenes and just adds another dimension to the experience.
Huh. So quartz for like quick clean hits and ceramic for something a little more maybe nuanced.
Yeah, you could say that.
Wow, it's really cool how much the materials can impact the experience. But hold on, I'm thinking about switching back and forth between a bowl for flour and then a banger for dabs.
Yeah.
Doesn't that sound like a recipe for like sticky residue and mixed flavors?
That's a great point, and that brings us to one of the most important factors in this whole equation, cleaning.
Okay, cleaning, you've definitely got my attention. Now, I'll admit, I haven't always been the best about keeping my bong sparkling clean.
Yeah.
But how big of a deal is it really, especially if you're using the same piece for flour and dabs?
Well, think about it this way. Your bong is kind of like a flavor chamber, right?
Right.
Every time you use it, residue builds up on the glass, in the water, even in all those tiny little crevices you can't see.
Yeah.
And all those leftover flavors, they can really affect your next session, especially when you're switching back and forth between flour and dabs.
I can imagine taking a dab and it's got this like faint taste of stale, ashy flour.
Exactly.
Not exactly the clean, flavorful experience I'm going for.
Not at all. And it's not just the taste either. Residue can also clog up the airways in your bong,
Oh, right?
making it harder to pull and, potentially affecting the temperature of your dab.
Oh, wow. So it's almost like trying to drink a smoothie through a straw that's half clogged with gunk.
Exactly. Not a very enjoyable experience.
Yeah, no thanks. Okay, you've convinced me. Cleaning is important. But before we get into the how-tos, let's talk about the types of residue we're dealing with here.
Sure.
What's the difference between what flour leaves behind versus dabs?
So flour, when it's combusted, it produces this thick tar-like residue. You know, that sticky, dark brown gunk that can be a real pain to clean?
Yeah,
It's mainly composed of plant matter resins and all those nasty combustion byproducts we talk about.
the dreaded bong resin. It's pretty unmistakable.
It is. And then with dabs, the residue is a little different.
Okay,
It's usually a thinner, more oily or waxy film. It depends on what kind of concentrate you're using.
gotcha.
And it's mostly made up of leftover cannabinoids, terpenes, and lipids.
Okay, so we've got sticky tar versus oily film. Neither one sounds particularly appealing.
Right.
But how does this residue actually affect the flavor?
Well, each type of residue has its own distinct flavor profile,
Okay,
and they don't exactly complement each other.
yeah, I bet.
Imagine taking a dab and you get this hint of burnt popcorn or that ashy, almost chemical flavor from the flour residue.
Ugh.
It totally masks those delicate terpenes and all the nuanced flavors of your concentrate.
Right. You want to be able to taste those like fruity, citrusy notes or that earthy, piney flavor.
Exactly, and that's why cleaning is so crucial, especially when you're using one bong for both.
Makes total sense. You want to start with a clean slate every time.
Exactly. Let those unique flavors shine through.
So it's like, you know how you have a separate cutting board for onions?
Yes.
You don't want your fruit salad tasting like last night's stir fry?
Perfect analogy.
Okay, I am fully on board with the importance of cleaning. But to be honest, sometimes it just feels like a chore.
I get it.
Is there any way to make it a little easier, less intimidating?
Absolutely. The key is to make cleaning part of your routine
Okay,
and to use the right tools and techniques.
gotcha.
One of the simplest and most effective methods is using isopropyl alcohol and salt.
Oh yeah, the classic ISO and salt combo. I've definitely heard about that, but never actually tried it myself. Can you walk me through it?
Sure, it's really easy. So first you want to disassemble your bong.
Okay,
Take out the bowl or banger, the downstem, and any other removable parts.
break it down.
Right? For smaller parts like the bowl or banger, you can put those in a seeable plastic bag or a container with isopropyl alcohol. The higher the percentage, the better.
Okay.
Add a couple tablespoons of coarse salt. The salt acts as an abrasive.
Oh, so it's like little scrubbers helping to loosen up that gum.
Exactly. Seal the bag or container tightly and just give it a good shake for a few minutes.
Okay.
You'll actually be able to see the alcohol changing color as it lifts away all the grime.
Oh, that's got to be satisfying.
It is. And for the bong itself, you can use the same ISO and salt method. Just pour some alcohol and salt in there, plug the openings of your hands or some plastic wraps,
Gotcha.
and give it a good swirl. You can also use pipe cleaners to get into those hard-to-reach spots.
Pipe cleaners are like a bong cleaner best friend.
They are.
Okay, so we've shaken, we've swirled. Now what?
Now comes the crucial part, rinsing. Rinse all the parts thoroughly with warm water to remove any leftover alcohol or salt.
Right, you don't want your next hit tasting like rubby alcohol.
Definitely not. And if there's still some stubborn residue, you can definitely repeat the process.
Okay, so soak, shake, rinse, repeat if needed. Got it. Any other tips for keeping my bong in tip-top shape?
Yeah, try to rinse your bong with warm water after each use.
Okay,
This will prevent the residue from hardening and make cleaning a lot easier later on.
so it's all about those little maintenance habits.
It is.
Okay, cool. Anything else?
If you're a frequent flower smoker, think about getting an ash catcher.
Oh, yeah?
It attaches to your downstem and catches most of the ash before it even reaches the water.
Ash catchers are game changers for sure.
They are, and when you're switching between flower and dabs, having dedicated bowls and bangers can be a real lifesaver.
Okay,
It's a little bit more of an investment up front, but it really helps to prevent any unwanted flavor mixing.
right. So you could have your flower bowl ready to go and then your dab banger all set up and no need to worry about cleaning in between.
Exactly.
But let's be real here. Even with the best cleaning habits, is there a chance that using one bong for both could eventually affect the flavor no matter what?
Yeah, it's definitely possible. Over time, even with the most meticulous cleaning, some residue might get embedded in the glass.
Oh, okay.
And that could potentially affect the flavor in subtle ways, kind of like seasoning a cast iron skillet.
I see what you mean. So it kind of becomes part of the bong's character.
You could say that.
Okay, so we've covered cleaning, the different types of residue, even the long-term flavor impact. But now I'm curious, is using one bong for both flour and dabs actually safer than using separate pieces? Yeah, that's a really good question. Is it actually safer to use one bong, or are we better off keeping our flour and dab setups totally separate?
Well, I think the main safety concern with using one bong for both is the heat.
Okay.
Dabbing involves using a torch to heat the banger or nail to super high temperatures.
Right.
And if you're not careful, that heat can really stress the glass,
Yeah.
which can lead to, cracks or even shattering in some cases.
Yikes. Okay, so the type of glass is super important then.
It's crucial, yeah. Like we talked about earlier, borosilicate glass is really the gold standard for Bong,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're planning on dabbing.
Okay.
It can handle those high temps without, cracking or warping.
So borosilicate glass is a must-have, got it. Are there any other safety tips for using a torch?
Yeah, definitely. You want to make sure you're using a good quality torch with adjustable flame settings. So you can really control the heat and avoid overheating your banger,
Right.
and always heat your banger slowly and evenly.
Okay.
Move the flame around to distribute the heat properly.
I've definitely seen people just blast the banger with direct heat, like they're trying to get it done as fast as possible.
Yeah, you got to be patient. It's way better to take your time and heat it properly than to rush it and, risk breaking something or hurting yourself.
Absolutely. Safety first. So beyond the heat, are there any other safety things to think about when you're using one bong for both? What about that residue buildup we talked about? Could that be a health risk?
Well, residue buildup itself isn't like inherently dangerous,
Okay.
but it can create an environment where bacteria and mold can grow,
Oh, right.
especially if you're not cleaning your bong regularly and you're letting dirty water sitting there for a long time.
So it's not just about flavor, it's also about hygiene.
Exactly. It's kind of like washing your dishes after every meal.
Right.
It prevents the buildup of nasty bacteria and keeps your kitchen nice and clean.
Makes sense. So it sounds like the safety stuff boils down to using the right equipment, being mindful of the heat, and just keeping things clean.
Yeah, pretty much. If you're doing all of that, then using one bong for both flour and dabs can be totally safe.
Awesome. But what about just personal preference? Some people might say that if you really want to experience the true flavors of flour and dabs, you got to have separate rigs.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get that. Especially if you're like a connoisseur and you really care about flavor purity, then having separate rigs makes sense.
Okay.
It eliminates any chance of cross-contamination, even if it's just a tiny little hint of flavor carryover.
So it's like having a specific wine glass for each type of wine.
Exactly.
You don't want to mix of the delicate flavors.
Right. Some people really want to experience each strain or concentrate in its purest form.
Yeah. But on the flip side, there's definitely something to be said for simplicity and just having one bong that can do it all.
Oh, for sure. It's all about finding what works for you and your lifestyle. If you're all about efficiency, you like to save space and money, then a single bong with a good cleaning routine might be the perfect option.
And if you're all about flavor and you have the space for separate rigs, then go for it.
Exactly. There's no right or wrong answer. It's all about what you enjoy most.
I love that. This has been such a cool deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much about flour and dabs and cleaning and safety.
Good. I'm glad.
I'm definitely feeling more confident about experimenting with my setup. What's the one thing you hope our listener takes away from today's episode?
I hope they feel empowered to make their own decisions about their cannabis use.
Yeah.
Whether they decide to stick with one bong or invest in separate rigs, the important thing is they understand the pros and cons of each approach.
Totally. And find what makes them happy.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well said. Well, everyone, this has been another deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure. Remember, there's always more to learn and explore in the world of cannabis. So keep asking those questions, experiment, and find what works best for you. And as always, if you have any thoughts or questions about today's deep dive, let us know. Thanks for joining us.